We do acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where we're gathered, the Yaku and the tribal people north and south of the Lisbon River, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And I mentioned already yesterday that it's a nice occasion to do this acknowledgement because we're overlooking Victoria Park Miranda, but also I'm keeping one eye on refreshing the ABC News page, because as we are in the seminar right now, the Queensland Premier there, because the Fulvies at the lectern probably throws distance over there near Parliament, making announcements about the Olympic Stadium plan, which will, everyone's speculating, entail a stadium on the Indigenous lands over here in Barambin, which a lot of us have been working with local communities to try and prevent this from happening. So it will cause a lot of controversy of what is going to be announced, but let's see what the official line of the government is going to entail. But yeah, it will be interesting to watch that. Before we though go into the political reality, we're going to go back into the privilege of being in academia and listening to Valentina. Valentina is a professor in the University of Lisbon, in the Interactive Technologies Institute as well.
Yes.
She's got a PhD from the University College in Dublin, Ireland.
Yes.
And she has been worked quite extensively across the domains of electronic art, digital media, interaction design, human-computer interaction, with a particular interest more recently in sustainability and more than human concerns. And today we're really pleased to hear more about some of the work that she's been doing in the area of cultural heritage, identity, storytelling, a lot of the kinds of concepts and themes that also I think resonate really nicely with the work that the School of Design and the QUT Designer have been engaged in. So we'll get, again, a little plug for the book. There is a chapter that Valentina and Nuno and the team have been working on in a new edit collection that we are just launching or soft launching. It's called Blockchain for Good, the transformative impacts on industry, community, and the planet. And there's also a bunch of other great case studies and examples of how blockchain is often a very technical domain that is in the mainstream media talked about more in the sense of cryptocurrency speculations. Is actually used for a whole bunch of really interesting purposes. And one of them is around the traceability of agricultural produce and food provenance. So that is something that I encourage you all to check out. The book has already a digital footprint on the Routledge website, but we're still waiting on the printed copies. We'll get Valentina to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes. It's going to be Q&A. There's also still sandwiches and Easter eggs available and drinks or water. So please help yourselves, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus, for the introduction, and thank all of you for being here. And yes, while the blockchain was what kind of got us collaborating and coming here, I'm going to talk about something else in this presentation. And first, I want to introduce a little bit myself, because I have an unusual path. I come from fine arts and painting, and then moved to multimedia, and finally interactive narrative and HCI. And I ended up working in the computer science engineering departments because the collaborations were much more exciting than staying in the same, let's say, area. And also the funding is more exciting, as some of you might know. It's harder to get funding in the humanities. And my research so moved from art to more human-computer interaction, passing through storytelling and gaming. And now I'm very focused on the heritage discourse. And I'm going to talk about that in this presentation mostly, although my work is also spanning other areas. Mostly work with Nuno, and many of the things you see are collaborations. But you will see that a lot of these work merges creativity with design, with art, and especially now that finally, when I became a full professor, I talked with the department and said, look, I'm not going to do any more quantitative stuff. Now it's going to be about connecting with art and design, and I'm going to show some work that sort of starting to do that. And so what I want to focus on, and I am focusing on these days, is really the excitement that there is around the posthuman project. And I guess that you've all heard at least, you know, the word and the philosophy that kind of derives from a long line of intellectuals and feminist thinking and technoscience. But what is really now driving the interest to the posthuman is the fact that, you know, we've seen that the man and the Anthropocene is putting our planet at risk, and looking at a bigger picture, the centering the human, connecting with more than humans seems to be one way that we could push our research through and hopefully inspire some change. So here was a definition that I picked. There are many, but this one is general enough to sort of frame the work that I will present. And basically is posthumanism is changing the traditional human-centered views of the world, and it emphasizes the interconnectedness of species and complexity, and for some is connecting with more than humans as other species and also materials, but also the non-human agents and artificial intelligence that are all part of these entanglements, to the point that I often refer to Chris Frauenberg article, not more that recent, but talks about a fourth wave of HCI, which is called entanglement HCI, borrowing from physics. But the question that comes right after all of this interest and engagement with and for more than humans is, how do we do that as we are humans? It's not that we can leave our bodies and our culture and everything behind and just become a more than human, or completely adopt or live as a more than human. So that what we have as humans is critical reflection, and we can use that to help us think beyond ourselves, decentering ourselves. So when I talk about more than humans and posthumanism, I'm really emphasizing this critical quality we have as humans, being aware of our limits, being aware that we are connected to a bigger whole and a picture, and that's sort of the way that I'm thinking about this. I also want to sort of spend a minute on this, I call it prequel, before diving into the storytelling aspect of this research, is that especially from the scientific point of view and being in the engineering and computer science department, this is very, very true. We look at understanding from mainly 2 points of view: the theory, which can be proven by science, and the practice, which is what we experience directly. And then we derive more theory from the practice, we design more practice from theory. But in fact, there is a third way, which is narrative, or poiesis in Greek. And narrative is a very traditional sense that goes back millennia and is a way to make sense of our lives, to communicate, but also to think and to understand. And there are many different ways of storytelling and narratives, which are different. You know, obviously the language of the anthropologist and the way that anthropologists will look at stories is different from the way a filmmaker or a writer looks at story. But they are all sort of very different ways to understand and to make knowledge than the very scientific quantitative way that is often privileged in some areas, like the scientific areas. And so I'm going to show some tools and some research that has storytelling as a very prominent aspect of it. Technology is also a strong ally of storytelling. We're just having this conversation a second ago, how, especially from the artistic point of view, technology always comes in as an enabler with different aesthetics possibilities, but is never really, from the narrative point of view, the technology always comes after. It's never something that sort of starts before the story or the message. And here I was compiling a quick quick run through from when at least I started to be interested in technology, when I was still in fine arts and hypertext and hypermedia were emerging. And then in the year 2000, it became very interesting, cutting edge, the idea of having content associated with certain locations. Locative media emerged as a paradigm. That's when I did my PhD. And then the whole pervasive computing everywhere, pervasive gaming, to move on to augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, extended realities, the metaverse, and now AI. And just to show, you know, how this continuously change, but the core of storytelling somehow remains unchanged. And then I'm going to start to dive into more of my projects and research practices. I've been looking in the last few years, in particular, at heritage and how the heritage discourse is changing. And from what was the Venice charters in the 60s, heritage was considered something that only experts could determine and associated with very tangible assets like statues, paintings, buildings. But the values and the heritage discourse changes as we evolve and understand better. And the Bora Charter, which Bora is in Australia, right? And it was the meeting was held here, introduced a different approach, a more value-led approach that changed the way that we recognize heritage. And it included also intangible heritage and indigenous heritage and the local communities, the voices of the local communities. So the heritage was reshaped around values that are aesthetics, historical, scientific, but also social, spiritual, political, national, and cultural. And it's from this angle that we got several EU projects funding to pursue the coupling of heritage with technology. I'm going to go through these projects. Obviously, they are EU-funded projects. They last around 3 years, and several strands sort of came out of the funding. They are big teams that I don't know if you're familiar with EU funding. They bring a little bit like Nuno explained yesterday. They bring together different countries in Europe. There needs to be 2 or 3 countries minimum, and then different teams inside each country. So the work that you will see here, I will specify a little bit if it was local or the general project, but is anyway the effect of the work of many, many people. So the MEMEX project was funded in 2019. And it's centered around the use of technologies to bring social cohesion and inclusion with communities at risk of exclusion around the topic of cultural heritage. And this was supposed to have a technical component, which would develop what we will see in a moment. It's a storytelling app that has a location-aware side and augmented reality and a knowledge graph. But especially the big impact was from the social side. The work was designed to work with NGOs and cultural institutions that dealt with migrants and communities at risk of exclusions, to bring their stories and their discourse into the heritage discourse, as we've seen following the Borough Charter sort of set of values. The stories of the people that live in the space are making heritage. And we set off to do 3 pilots, one in Barcelona with migrant women that emigrated to Barcelona, and they were involved in sharing and providing their stories. Paris District 19, which is a sort of a district with some social issues. There is a low degree of employment and some challenges there. And Lisbon, which is the pilot we were responsible for, which was involving migrants that were coming from the ex-colonies of Portugal, so from Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, São Tomé, and Brazil, and engaging and involving them to connect to their heritage with the local heritage, with the heritage from their original countries. The project involved 86 participants. We collected around 70 stories across the 3 pilots, with many studies and formative studies, and produced one knowledge graph that encompassed all of the content collected from the participants, and 3 applications. One is a web-based and also mobile-based, now it's the same thing, storytelling app. Another is the augmented reality app that allows you to see the content in the locations that the content relates to, and the content is the stories of the participants and the connected heritage that is in the city that somehow connects to that heritage. And then very technical sort of tool to anchor the content in the location and connect them with the knowledge graph, or AI at the time. And just to say, we were planning as the HCI group to do a lot of workshops and in contact with people and walks through the cities, and sort of really work shoulder to shoulder with participants. And then COVID sort of started just a few months after. So we managed to do a few workshops, not as many as we wanted. That's a limitation that, yeah, it's kind of it didn't stop us, but it somehow affected what we were doing. So, because yeah, storytelling and co-design, they were our basic tool, and technology was acting more as a support. So I'll describe first the first study we did. Was actually is an interesting format, and there is an interesting because it can be replicated. I think I have in the next, there is a QR code if you want to see the publication. There is a pictorial that has been published at DIS if you want to read more in detail the documentation of the work, but I'm gonna just describe it quickly and indulge in one of the stories that we have collected. We engaged 10 participants for 1 week. The participants were mediated by the local NGO that was acting as a let's say safe link with the communities that were engaged, so they were not exploited or traumatized triggered by the content. And we asked the participants volunteer to, during 1 week, to engage with what they consider the heritage in their everyday lives. So they would take a picture and then accompany with a short description, a sort of a 200-character description of that piece of heritage. And they would do this for a week. And then they came together with us in a 4 hours co-design workshop where they all had their individual stories that were shuffled, and then in groups, they retold new stories about the pictures of another group. So in a way, we've tried to co-create new stories and novel content in a way based on the experiences. But what was very striking in the end of this, and this was to inform us about basically really the beginning of the project. What is heritage for these communities we want to design for? What is their understanding of heritage? Not stopping at the individual stories, but also having them look at some of the pictures together. And this gave us a lot of material to start the design and the requirement. But what was really striking and is available here at this link that you can also see from the pictorial, the set of stories that we received were very surprising. The heritage we saw through their eyes was not the heritage that we would have seen through our eyes as not only researchers, but also locals. I'm not Portuguese, but almost. And I'm using this example because I like very much the also the kind of message behind the beauty of these pictures. The first picture is a courtesan at the king's court, and she's from Cape Verde, and she's been considered as a powerful source of innovation and advice at the court. This is from the point of view of the participant that focused on women's and as powerful figures as in heritage. But looking closely, the figure of that courtesan has shackles at her feet. So she was actually a slave. She was a slave at the court of the king. But the participants saw her as a strong migrant figure that was actually powerful and that was that had introduced manners and cultural changes at the court. The second and third figure are the fisher women from Lisbon. They're a very known figure, known for their strength, very hardworking, and they take the fish from the fishermen and sell them at the market. And they are homaged in Lisbon in several public spaces, including the metro. The fourth is a mural of a Cape Verdean drummer, Batucadeira, which is a tradition of drumming in Cape Verde that also moves with the migrants from Cape Verde. And the tradition gets the women together to play drums together. And it's not only the music that they're sharing, but it's also a group of support with each other. So it's a very, again, important way to connect and to feel the support of each other when they're in a different country. And finally, the last is Caterina de Braganza. She was the Queen of England, married an English king. And she's also considered as a powerful immigrant that brought a lot of innovations at the court. And what is really striking here is that the social strata is not considered at all. These women are all put in the same position of strong immigrants that had very powerful roles wherever they went. And there are many more stories. If you want to access the pictorial, you will see a link to a special site with all of the booklets. But what we did was then to analyze the text and the images that we got to understand, as I said, what is heritage for our participants. And we realized that heritage, far from being what is in museums or what we are pointed out in the tourist guides, for them, heritage is life and memories, is history, is nature. There was a huge sort of highlighting of nature, reflecting spaces where they spend time with themselves and sort of relax and think, transport, and education, gender, and gentrification. And I encourage you to look at the paper and have more insights on this. Also, the type of workshop is quite easy in a way. If you have access to participants that are interested in participating, is an easy process to replicate if you have similar studies to conduct. Another face-to-face workshop we managed to do despite COVID is a speculative heritage workshop with, again, the help of the NGOs that provided the contact with participants that were coming from, we said, the ex-colonies of Portugal. And we used we adapted actually the speculative workshop of the magic machines. I don't know if you've heard of magic machines, some of you. It's from Christina Anderson and Ron Wakari wrote a very clear paper on how to use this method. And we adapted it because we thought it was a very hands-on and fun way to really think about something that was very poignant and think about it in the terms of building some future worlds. So the workshop itself basically consisting in giving the participants a kit with materials that are very, very hands-on, cardboard and scissors. And then we had some conversations with them before. Some themes were selected and crafted as prompts by us. The themes emerged from conversations with the participants, and they were thematics about discrimination, illusion, longing, losing roots, fear of not integrating. And each one of the participants would have 1 hour to build a machine, a physical machine with the paper that dealt and resolved the issue they had chosen. And what is interesting here is not so much the machine. I'm going to show you what, what came out, but is the moment in which they stand up and present the machine to the public, because in that moment they are describing how the machine would work, how would it solve the problem. And obviously that part of the conversation is what is very rich in inspiration and also unearthing a lot of the feelings of the sort of positions of the participants. So here we had, this is not out yet, this work, but hopefully soon. It's just a minor, some minor corrections, and then it will be out there to follow up if you want to use this with participants. But basically you can see that from the variety of machines, the first one is like a magic house inside and outside of which the migrants does the work of integration. So basically they see integration as a process that lasts a lifetime and that happens in the domestic settings. A machine that would detect true and false on the stories that are communicated through migrants. The problem was that often migrants depict their experience as super positive to those who are still at home because they have a lot of pressure, sometimes to deliver or to impress. And those at home are often eluded to start this journey with certain ideas when it's much harder than they think. Memory 300 also is emphasizing the way that a migrant is never completely into the new place, never completely settled. There's a lot of emotional labor that always continuously go back to what used to be familiar without effort. And this is also a known phenomenon in the social studies and migration studies called the diasporic mind. It's a mind that is fragmented and that it conducts parallel lives at the same time. So there is a lot of work to do to reconnect with the present while maintaining the past. Because the next one is, we would call it a pasta machine, is more of a stage, is the fact that together with the longing for integration, there is also the fear of losing roots. These are two concurring and contrasting feeling that create a sort of a cognitive dissonance. And that's another source of quite some labor in the mind. And then again, overcoming discrimination and the feeling of nostalgia, which is a very celebrated feeling in Portugal, for example, through all of the tradition of fado singing, who is singing what was there and the longing for their land. And all of these, again, are in a way beautiful reminders of the fact that migration, immigration, integration, they're not easy. They are very complex issues, and it's not enough just to integrate because you are in fear of losing everything that you had before. Is that when you are thinking, you always have this cross-border connectivity is always active, and maybe with technology we can help to celebrate this fragmentation and this duality and acknowledge it. And I always get a bit long on this because I'm also a migrant myself, so I kind of find resonating with these results a lot. But anyway, back to MEMEX. What we produced, and that was especially some of you doing that. The PhD with some of these tools. It kind of lived in an evolving application or prototype that had 3 stages. The first MVP, or minimum viable prototype, the first step was a simple storytelling app, uploading a picture and some text and geolocating it on a site. For the sake of the projects are these 3 sites, but in theory, the app should be available. European projects are a little bit bad in the fact that when the funding ends, everything stops working. So this should be working, but you never know. The second prototype integrated what I call what we were calling the knowledge graph. Now we would call it an AI that would read the story of the participant and find connecting heritage around the place where they are situated, so where they have geolocated their story. And finally, the third iteration included the augmented reality version. So you could use this app as you're going around the city, encounter a story. It would come up as a central dot, and you would see the connected heritage that can be situated around you. So this was, in a way, the outcome of the outcome that we've promised to the EU, but much more research came out and much more inspiration came out from this. And we have now also other 2 projects that are using somehow this framework in this app, and one is the Bauhaus of the Seas you've seen yesterday. The storytelling drop is based on the research of MEMEX. And then we have another project at ITI, is called Digital Citizen, and is a particular twinning project with the Italian Institute of Technology, who was the coordinator of this. So more a center on civics. And I won't talk about it here, but interested, then we can put you in touch with the PI. I also wanted to quickly have a go at this other project, just because we had this conversation yesterday. And starting from the storytelling app, we kind of took a diversion and tested it with a particular community of refugee, which was outside the pilot of the EU. So in a way, this became a side work. And what I found interesting about this work is that while the EU and the research that was coming associated with it had very strict protocol to deal with the participants, so we can only deal through the NGOs. We could not disclose any names, any faces. We could not contact them after the study, not even after the study was done. And so it was an app centered on storytelling, but they could not log in as themselves in the app. They had to go through the NGO, and this all was supposed to be for their benefit, for their privacy, for keeping their anonymity. But when we studied, we did a test, an evaluation of the minimum storytelling app with the community of refugees of the Portuguese Association for Refugees. We immediately found out that the participants wanted to be seen. They wanted to put their name and their face as authors of the stories. They wanted to have co-authors. They wanted to invite other members of the, let's say, who's using the app as co-author their stories. And yes, they wanted to be identified. So in a way, it was very different from what we had been doing for MEMEX. So we developed another app, another evolution of the app, which made use of this graph, which you can see again there. There is a link, and in a moment I'll give you the QR code. There's a paper about this. But basically, the graph allowed us to connect the users of the app among themselves, so to create a social network based on the people, and also connect the stories or story graph, and connect the stories depending on their thematic. So the stories had the number of tags of sort of definitions, and they were forming clusters of themes. We studied, we evaluated this second version with with 4 participants, but we got some interesting, I think, pointers to how to continue this work. And privacy concerns and anonymity were the first sort of assumption that blew up because, as I said, they wanted to be identified. They wanted to update their details and their context because it's changing continuously. This helped them keep track of who they were and how their situation was continuing. And they wanted to be identified and invite other people to co-author with them. Co-authoring and co-creating stories with others would help combat the alienation of being in the situation alone. So sharing stories with others and asking for contributions. At the same time, it could also highlight some divergences and some different points of view. But the platform can also be used to discuss these and iron them out. This kind of connection can help build social capital, which is one of the things that migrants miss, and refugees as migrants also. And we also were looking at opportunities to use distributed ledger technologies and blockchain. And at the time, we were still involved in the blockchain project. So it's, in a way, it pointed in some directions that didn't really follow through. But here is the paper, if you're interested in this kind of branching of the research, and also the link to the tool that Paolo developed. And if you want to reach out directly to Paolo, he's really the main author here. And then I just wanted to just spend a second here to look at opportunities for blockchain, which, you know, was such a big buzzword some years ago, and now we barely hear it. But still, it could be a very interesting way to help with the privacy and security of authors that are very vulnerable if they want to share themselves, share only some parts of their stories. It could also support the combination of personal stories with news and journalistic accounts. There is a distinction between migrant storytelling as migrants being the author and in control of the stories, and stories about migrants, which are stories told by third people, are journalists and people that are not in that situation and describe it. So there could be a way to connect the two. And also decentralization can also help prevent fake news and false information. So could safeguard the authenticity and the rightfulness of them. And this is, in a way, some of the main output from this project. If you want to get into more details, I think these three papers are describing it in a lot of details. And all of this work is in partnership with Nuno, who is here. And I will share the slides later, so if you don't capture it now, maybe you can have it later. And now we still have some time to dive into what is my current research, and really also my passion, which is the integration of nature and culture together. So finally, the way that, you know, heritage is moving, the heritage discourse is moving forward, is incorporating more than human and more than human understanding within heritage. And this connects with a lot of indigenous knowledge, and I guess also here you have a lot of this knowledge that could enrich this understanding of nature culture, and that really highlights much more sustainable and durable relationships with the world as a planet. Nature culture is not a new concept. It has been around many years, and you know, Donna Haraway more than 20 years ago was already talking about nature culture and it has many definitions, but basically is the fact that nature and culture cannot be divided. We are looking at nature from our human point of view, so we are defining nature from our cultural point of view, and we are part of nature. We are a species, part of nature. So this is why the nature and culture basically has an inseparable relationship. And to look at this, to imagine more sustainable future, is something that we are doing through our current project. But before I talk about the funded projects, I wanted to give you a hint of what I'm really personally doing, what I told my colleagues at computer science. They had to expect from me now. So I am integrating my background in visual art and painting with the art of noticing, which is Anat Singh sort of, let's say, tactic of techniques to get closer to the modern humans, to look closely to what's happening around us and to notice small things and try and understand through these small data and facts that we notice, what are they indexing? So what are they pointing at? And basically, again, this practice centers a little bit the human, or at least brings up the critical look on what's happening around us. And we're using, in particular with this pictorial, we're using, and we're proposing speculative methods to develop a future-oriented and ethical solution. So through noticing, I'll show you in a moment, we notice and incorporate more than human entanglements, and then ideate and think of speculative stories or fabulations where technology could also play a role. And the important part here is that these fabulations are not dystopic. We are getting there now with several researchers, and Rosi Braidotti, mentioned by Nuno yesterday. They are really promoting affirmative fabulations, affirmative thinking of the future, because otherwise we're just going to get depressed and disengage. I live in Portugal. My parents are in Italy and very old, and I fly every time I can to be with them. I feel guilty about it. I stop checking how much pollution I'm generating. This is what happens with only having dystopic stories told. I need to go. I will not stop going, and I rather ignore the harmful of flying. So to counteract a little bit this trend, we're looking at fabulation, a positive fabulation as a way forward. And these are just an example of the sketches that start as landscape sketches, but then looking closer, those are the same palms that are looked from a different point of view. I was intrigued by the hanging roots of the palms, which depict the erosion, which is given by the frequent floods brought by climate change, and starting to annotate, all of the stones, the beach is eroded, which is, I think, was what happened here in Brisbane with the typhoon. And that brings a lot of chain reactions in the environment. And by sketching, somehow I'm getting closer, and annotating, I'm noticing more about what's happening in this specific situation. But before I talk about the sort of the methods, I'm just gonna highlight some key research and concepts, which is basically how can we bring all of this amazing theory. We've all heard about post-human philosophy and theories. I tried to read Rosi Braidotti. I need to read her articles 3 times before I can get through the thick of her thinking, not to mention Latour or this very brilliant thinker and philosophers we have. This is somehow a way to bring post-human theories into practice. So we are looking at sketching and indexing, noticing and indexing, noticing what's happening around it. And indexing is it's a practice that actually comes from science and biology, where they, for example, are looking at the state of the corals. If the corals are bleached, they are indexing something. If we are noticing, for example, here, these brown seeds, where a certain type of seaweeds, not usually resting on these shores, that when the tide pushing them forward and then backward, leave the seeds to do this beautiful guirlande here. But if I'm just sketching, I just notice the beauty of this drawing on the sand. But if I'm noticing that it is seed, and I'm noticing it has different colors, and I'm noticing that there are really small crabs that are living among the seaweeds and that are dying when the seeds are drying. And I'm also noticing, and it's not in this, but it's in another drawing, that the seagulls now feeds on the seeds. And so all of these are changes in the ecosystem that are brought simply by the seaweed arriving to the shores of this beach in Portugal. And going back and doing some more research, we learned that this seed is sargasso seed that actually comes from the Caribbean and is due to a change of winds that now are pushing these huge masses of seaweeds towards this beach, and probably is connected also with the amount of erosions of the beach and the fact that the sea is coming forward with this wind that pushes, and so on and so forth. And I mean, these changes of wind are reflected also in the airport of Madeira Island, which is a very short airport and that is affected by the kinds of winds. And now many flights cannot land. They need to try a few times to land because the wind is blowing in the opposite direction that it used to most of the time before. So you start to notice these entanglements and see what they're indexing. And where do we do this kind of exercise? We do it in, again, what we call the contact zone. Have you heard of the contact zone? It's a term now, it's used in a lot in HCI. It really is that interface, that moment where different species come into contact. Is where you can find these interactions. And they're often the site of power asymmetries. So that's also why they are interesting to look at. And also an interesting and important concept are the polyphonic assemblages, which are also a term by Anna Tsing, the same that is emphasizing noticing as a way to get in contact with more than humans. And polyphonic assemblages are assemblages of different species, different type of entanglements, and they are usually bringing together humans and more than humans voices. And I know I have these terms here because also I was told by the reviewers of the pictorial to use the vocabulary that is coming from the original thinkers in weave it into the, which I found really extremely beneficial, because when I went back and looked at the content zone, I understood that this is a concept that is very old. It's not something just Kai papers has, and the same with assemblage. It goes back. There's a whole Guattari and Deleuze sort of writing about assemblages many years ago. And anyway, this is somehow a process that myself and Nuno embarked during actually a whole summer or two. Actually, sometimes with COVID, this becomes blurred. But we spent a lot of time on these smaller islands, even smaller than Madeira. For those who know, Madeira is a small island of Portugal. And because the COVID also was less severe there, and we had more freedom and space. And I was sketching, and then Nuno was helping, annotating and indexing what was happening in the landscape. And then together we were creating these fabulations. And this is an example here from the image of the beach, which is nearby the port. We noticed that there is a big algae factory there, which is actually not even always functioning. And we hypothesized if there was a spill here and all of these algae started to, and they're quite fluorescent in color, let's say pollute the sea. But this would remain at the dystopic level. So we moved on from there, and actually, I don't know if I have I have some of the images here, and thought, what if we were able to channel this fluorescent water and bring it to the town, and in that way illuminate the street and the houses with the natural source. And inside this tube, the marine species could travel, and then you could sort of develop a sort of affinity, or maybe even now with AI, they are starting to decipher communication with whales. What if we were able to start communication with the species? And of course, this is a fabulation, but is a much nicer scenario, in a way more inspiring and maybe hopeful of a future where we could use maybe some of the damage we've done and reignite, rekindle our relationship with species. And before concluding there, the method is quite, I think, straightforward. There must be an initial inspiration, and it measures art with the more scientific type of inquiry. There needs to be an inspiration, which could be a fact or a view or something dramatic, an effect of the erosion, for example. And from there, it starts the figuration, the sketching, the noticing, the indexing of what is happening in that piece of reality. And from here, there can be a dreaming, thinking, some more researching to create the stories or the fabulation. What is the last important step is that this fabulation, even if they start with quite a dystopic feeling, because we've seen the typhoon eroding the beach, and now we don't have a beach, and that's a feeling of missing out, then there's an effort to turn it into affirmative. How can we make this the start of a new future where we are actually thriving and all of the species around us? And here is another example of a fabulation from the roots of the palms that are hanging out. And it's quite a dire view because these trees are obviously not thriving, not well, they are drying. And just behind them, there's a house. That's actually a rare, a sort of a case of Nuno's drawing, which he did. The house is falling into the sea. So there's danger for the plants, but also for the humans. And the fabulation turns into, the humans actually caring for the roots, recovering them, watering, and sort of safeguarding the palm from falling. And in return, the palm quite naturally start to break and sort of into the house and also support it. Maybe that's a natural movement. We've seen the rainforest here have these huge roots that I'm sure would support very well a house, but also it's an act of that benefits the human, an act of kindness, an act of kinship. So humans and plants take care of each other. And that's the example one of the examples. Again, if you check the pictorials, there are more fabulations, more examples, and there's a whole site of fabulations, which I enjoy doing during the COVID. And the contribution here are, as I said, bridging theory with practice in a designerly way that we can embrace. Really push for affirmative fabulations in HCI and materializing this practice through a set of clear steps and clarifying fabulation as an approach in human-computer interaction. And this brings me maybe the last 10 minutes or less, or maybe.
Yeah, let's leave some time for questions.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the project that I'm coordinating now. So Nuno is involved. And it is, in a way, it was going back with my first passion. My PhD was on locative storytelling, and gaining sort of this project for me was, somehow the project I always wanted to do since my PhD. And is to look at digital storytelling in cultural heritage and heritage landscapes. So there are several partners here. As I said, in Europe, we have several institutions and several nations partnering, and we are partnering with the UK, and the Avery Henge or circle is a kind of big type of Stone Age, Neolithic set of stones that are marking burials and spiritual grounds of the Neolithic. The hills of Tara in Ireland are those hills which were the site of the High Kings of Ireland before the Romans, before the Celts. So again, thousands of years ago, it's a very sacred site still. And then we have the Sackenberg Museum of Natural History in Frankfurt, and this is Madeira actually. This is Spain, Italy, Madeira, Africa. Madeira is here. So the case study we are concerned with is Madeira Island, which actually, no, I don't have the picture now, but it's a beautiful, very nature-rich island with a lot of biodiversity, and that really, where you can really see that nature and culture are one thing. And the way we started this project was to develop what we call the nature culture probes. Again, pictorial, if you want details, is out there from TEI. But we developed a tool in order to understand people engagement with the nature culture landscape. And the tools, they look like postcards that I have a particular question and an image of the site. And the questions are basically, they were researched to be in line with the post-human concepts and engage people. I think I had them all listed, but not here. Anyway, if I try to remember all because I can't read. Yeah, I can read. So they would engage a visitor with thinking, if they had to send a message to the past, what would they tell the visitor? Or if the stones could talk, what would they tell you? So to engage with the more than humans. If you were a future visitor, what would you notice? What would you want to notice about this place? So they're engaging with the different temporalities, with the past, with the future, with what is sacred to you, with spirituality. So they have a very open-ended and fun way to engage with the landscape, and the participants would fill in short answer and then either give it back to us, or there is a box at the sites. The postcards were complemented with the sensory mapping. So this is a site of Avery, and visitors are encouraged to report 5 stops, each one engaging with one particular sense. So with what do you see, what do you hear, what do you smell, and mark here on the map, where did they engage with which sense. And this was developed also for Madeira Island with the same questions, different images, different sensory maps, and also Ireland, all of the heritage that had landscape. And this is just to show how the postcards adapted from Tara Hill in Ireland, Avery, the Battle of the Boyne, also another site in Ireland that is involved, and the Levada. So we use the same kind of fun language and the same questions to, okay, so I think I skipped one. To deploy the probes in all 3 locations, in Ireland, in Madeira, and in Avery. And then we studied the results. And while the methods paper is out, the results are still submitted. So I'm just going to highlight 3 main big tensions that emerged. And it was heritage preservation versus public engagement. How much, do we want to preserve nature, especially in Madeira, and how much do we want to engage tourists to visit? There is a point in Madeira where the levadas are so, the levadas are the walking natures in Madeira, are so full that they need a traffic sign, a traffic light, to stop the flow of people and let the ones that are already in the path to leave. So what kind of experience of nature is that, at the same time, the tourism is a very important resource for the island. So how do we go gauge that? Also, Avery is the Neolithic site, but it's also a village with people that live there and that have this huge influx of tourists, especially in certain moments. And the solstice of June is still a very big spiritual celebration, especially for the people of the community. And they have their ceremonies that are happening on that day. And the tourists are also there in a little bit in the way. And so on and so forth. The Battle of the Boyne is a very contested site in Ireland, where there was a battle that basically decided the Protestant ruling of the country against the Catholics. So for the Irish people, which some are Catholic, some are Protestant, this is still not clear how it should be sort of looked at. Then the tensions between nature and technologies, these are all sites with a very strong natural landscape and beauty. Do we really want to put some more technology there where there is already so much? And especially again for Madeira Levadas, from the surveys, people don't want more technology. They go on the Levada to respect the benefits of being immersed in nature, leaving their phone behind, or at least forgetting them in their pockets for a bit. So the locative media element here really doesn't resonate. And then it highlighted the relational attributes of nature culture, how this is a site of relating with others, of entangled relationship, of power relationships. So it's a very rich site for investigating post-human points. And this was the other one, the other postcard. So anyway, there are a couple of papers published already on the results only of the Madeira study. The comparison of the three is still under evaluation. But if you're interested, these are the QR codes. And to close, I'm going to quickly talk about the results. So all of this was exploratory research to design a transmedia intervention from our point of view on the Madeira case study. And from the studies, we decided to have the technology concentrated in the museum and in the visitor centers, a very unintrusive companion for the Levada, which is under development now and is a PhD student made her thesis, PhD thesis about it. We hope to have something out soon, but basically it's a sleeve that you can wear and that you can program according to the ecological region and contact zone you're entering, and you can issue up to 3 calls of surrounding species. And just the act of wearing this and issuing the call attunes the person in a very different way to the surrounding, even if they don't receive a response. There is almost like, as they're wearing this, they're in communication with the other species. And this is work in progress. We won't go too much into details. What we have been developing and are quite far into it is the final reflection moment or prequel. These are not moments that needs to be experienced in necessarily this order. You can start from the center and go out. But this is embodied, yeah, this is the way that the transmedia would work with the critter connect, the companion species, story installation in the museum, and then AI dialogues with the species. That will be the installation inside. And then the reflective or inspiring moment, which is a heritage game. And I want to just conclude with quickly showing you this, because that's also something that I think is easily, well, not easily, but is adaptable to other cultures. And it looks at the island of Madeira and paths that are designed over the natural and cultural landmarks. So important sites for biodiversities, cities, some monuments, something that has happened, folklore. And the idea is that, let's see if I can, maybe there's this ways here. There are a set of characters. They're not in this slide, but they can be from humans to a tour guide, a child, a differently able person, a more than human. You choose your character and you start from the coast of Madeira, throw the dice and move through it. Every stop corresponds to a prompt. And the prompt is derived from a natural cultural heritage of the island. The prompt gives you something like, you arrive at the natural swimming pools formed by volcanic rocks. What do you do? And on the side, you have a writer sheet, which is structured according to the hero's journey. So your character is undergoing a hero's journey that is shaped by the cultural encounters that they have on the island. So what I'm seeing here is that instead of Madeira, there could be another place there, another county, something that is heritage rich. And every step, it's a specific piece of heritage that is brought forward. And the characters can also be shaped according to the local culture and what is interesting. anyway, this paper also is going to be out soon, but not yet. So I will provide you in a few weeks, hopefully, with something. So this is the hero's journey, the sheet, the characters, and the writer sheet here. And we are now developing the digital version, so it's possible to play online. It's still a bit rough. And thank you. I think talked a lot.
All right, we do have the room for another half an hour, but I know we're running a little bit over time from what we've advertised. So questions from the audience, comments, reactions, anyone would like to guess on? Jane.
Thank you. That was absolutely lovely. Absolutely. And I'm trying to phrase something around that last word. So,
this one.
so my focus was story games.
Oh, okay. That's
We work a lot with what we call meaningful play quite carefully, you know, the way that we can employ particularly analog, but also in any playful magic circle space to engage meaning. Now, one of the things about game design imposed and layered upon place. There's a very, very weird. It's a sort of space. I told you I haven't quite formulated this question yet.
Yeah. You were put on the spot.
There's a disjunct that happened in the sense that so I might be playing Pokemon, which yes, I still play. One of millions, by the way. And that layers a certain kind of character and adventure on the world. And there's been a number of talks about the way that particular game might get you out into place, and through that you understand place. And the disjunct is that in fact, no, just gets you out. You understand the game. So layering the game on the world actually doesn't necessarily connect you to the world, because essentially you can't have it both ways. You can't say games can construct meaning but don't train you to be a killer. You know, that kind of, you know, and then say, but now we can have meaning and it's embedded in a place. Oh dear, you're learning to, you know, catch animals and bring them in from the wild. So I'm just a bit curious as to how this game's working out, because you said you could have anywhere there. And that's my curiosity, because we tried something quite similar and quite resonant with that, using those same sort of role-playing game type approaches to putting adventurers into place. But again, dealing with that disjunct between the fabulation and the world of the game and the actual physical place. So how's that going? Sorry, that was such a long way.
Oh, thank you. This is a wonderful question that actually connects a lot of things in my brain, because when I was doing my PhD on locative narrative, I bumped into that problem. It was not a game, but it was a story of certain people living in a community. And the idea was to walk through the place, the real place, and encounter bits of the stories. And there was that problem because the suspension of disbelief that you have when you're following a character, or maybe when you are engaging with the game and you are absorbed in the circle, it disconnects you from the real place. So first, it could bring you into troubles, crossing the road or bumping into people, but also, okay, so this is the house where that person lived. And then you are not in the story anymore. You are in a place that has a very different reality from, or because of time, or because it's here in a different in a different type of entanglement. So yes, that was something that I ended up resolving, not proposing locative games that connect you to the place. The locative games, they just that I was thinking of, they use the reality as a navigation tool. Basically, it's an editing tool. So you could physically edit your story by choosing to move in this direction or in that direction. If it's a multi-branching story, for example. And the fact that, you know, if you want to have the place as part of the story, then you need to go in virtual reality, not in the real reality, I think, from storytelling. From this, going back to this work, what we heard from the studies was, it was coming from a different direction. It was participants that did not want to be bothered when they were in nature. So we started to deconstruct the idea of having a game in nature, even if it was heritage inspired, because they already had nature culture around them. And this game is a board game. So in a way, you're playing this game. You might have never been to Madeira. We had some game testing with people that have never been to Madeira and loved it because they could imagine it. Based on these prompts, they made their own image of Madeira, and the journey of their character was meaningful because it was shaped through the hero's journey. And people that had been in Madeira loved it because they were focusing very much again on the character. They had, this game lasts an hour and a half. And because you have only 8 steps of the hero's journey. So when you get to the end, you stop throwing the dice, and they were getting really involved with the character, and they had a moment to tell a story. They said, I never thought I could tell a story from beginning to the end like this. So in a way, we detached from the reality of the place a bit.
Yeah, use it for the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if you remember that was a subject for a lot of discussion around the old Assassin's Creed one, that it posited people in fabulous locations around the world, but beautifully constructed to be, very authentic.
Yeah.
The new one's supposed to be superb.
Oh. I haven't played
A
yet.
different place. But yeah, we can chat. That's a
yes,
really interesting
yes.
point, because we want to use these. Right, now
We've got a question on Zoom. This is from Michael Bromwich, who's doing his PhD with us, but he's based in Townsville.
Okay.
He says, I really enjoyed the presentation, Valentina. I love the sketches and transport project too. One question, is heritage considered genuine when a designer helps participants design their heritage? That is, a designer helping, for instance, an indigenous community digitize their oral or geographical history or create new cultural narratives.
So it was a question. How?
Is it still considered that heritage is genuine when the designer helps the participants? So when you're the mediator in between.
I think that we are venturing in the authorized versus non-authorized heritage, and I think in general the heritage discourse is moving away from just accepting authorized heritage as the correct one. So as long as your participant is in agreement and they are, not used, but they are co-creating and they are part of the results, also acknowledged, and then I think that's heritage it's a lot of common sense, basically. It's a lot of care and sensibility that needs to be used in that process. So you're not just using someone because of your needs, either publication, PhD, game design. You really have a genuine intention to bring that discourse out for some benefits that is also of the other person.
Mhm.
So I think when there are benefits on both ends and they are agreed upon, I think it's
Yeah. Okay. And Zeta?
Yes, thank you. Well, I've got so many highlights. Thank you very
Mm.
much. Absolutely delightful presentation. But my question is probably more about like your research methods, like which are trace back to your background in visual arts. I really liked that kind of maybe methods coming from a bit of ethnographic research where you do this observational sketches and notes. And I was actually thinking when you mentioned about indexing stuff in a way how scientists would index that. However, if we would probably incorporate the mark making as elements of those drawings, such as where you imprint elements to the same
Yeah.
artwork, that would also index something else. And I was thinking, or maybe like as an artist, would you give it another methodological name? How to do that? Because when you imprint, I don't know, like a seed, it would also index the state or condition of the elements, and that would also potentially speak to another bigger processes and stuff. So I really appreciated like the way you incorporate those interesting elements to validate them as a proper research tool, other than just like something nice to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a question. It's more like, what,
No, but
how would you, like expand this as a practice? Or is it more like into the technology side, or maybe, more into different artistic medium, like tangible medium things?
I think this is the perfect, example of the bridge that I am interested to build, and that is starting to resonate with the interdisciplinarity being something even from the computer science they're looking forward to embrace. And as I tell, my co-researchers, and there is not one method, if you can motivate and describe it in such a detail that can be replicated, then you can publish it and others can use it. And the idea of pressing maybe real materials, seeds or leaves into these drawings would be wonderful, really wonderful. And I think that it can add a lot of layers of indexing and noticing.
We'll take two more. One was at back there, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm also really have a question more of I was very interested in a lot of the things you did, particularly I think the sort of the later things, because you were talking about some of the cultural landmarks, and particularly because it's one of the Stonehenges, and I'm from the UK, so obviously I know the main Stonehenge. There are quite a few of them.
Yeah.
I'm interested, I think, in the dissonance as people looking at these things as like a natural part of the landscape, because so much time has passed, and their kind of interaction with the landscape in that way. And yet they are actually a form of technology, because they were from there originally, they were put up, particularly the original one. And I think in itself, I'm really not clear on this, but I think it was a calendar of sorts anyway. It interacted with the position of the sun. So I like, is that, it's obviously a kind of a tension that you feel, but like, how did some of the people you tested with feel, I suppose, about some of that? Did they engage with the discourse about those things being a form of technology, or did they not engage that deeply with them?
With
Oh, so some of the locations, I know you were looking at the Madeira one in particular, not the UK ones, but like, these forms of interaction, how much of it did spark in them as sort of a way of questioning their environment later on?
there were a lot of, depends obviously if we were asking the conservation, we had a variety of participants, but for example, the archaeologists will very much value the stones as technology in a way, and also the fact that they were not there, so they were not part of the land, and how did this landscape evolved? On the other hand, the stones are a natural material, so it has the evolution and the layers of the the musk and the little, how do you say, the lichens that are naturally there, they are also saying something. So for the Levada, some participants noticed the levadas. The levadas are the water channels that run parallel to this nature trail, and they were built in the 17th century from stone, and who knows from who, but a lot of people died in the process. So it's a technology, and it was in a very advanced technology 300, 400 years ago. And also all of the lives that were sacrificed for building these. And also, what would be that piece of nature now if there were no levadas? And so there are reflections on the technology, even if it's not the digital technology that we think of. But it would be nice to engage more different audiences to see what are the takes.
And Jock.
Yeah, congratulations. As someone with a similar career trajectory from fine arts through to somewhere else.
Yes.
I love the combination of forms and presentation at the formal level, which I guess leads me to the question. You talked about, you've spoken about a whole range of materials from clay and raffia all the way through to the digital. Could you talk a little bit about how your training in fine arts enables you to be comfortable with such a range of processes and materials?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, in the beginning, when I moved to computer science, I felt that my background was a big missing. So I was missing out on all of the. Yeah. Yes. And then as I went forward and actual programming and more hands-on technology was mattering less, as I was able to think through and venture into the unknown. That's where the arts came in very helpful, because
You're comfortable with uncertainty.
yes, with uncertainty, we're not confining a method to a set of rules. It can start from there and it can end up completely. And mixing materials, I'm thanks for noticing. But yeah, it goes from 2D to 3D, anything, printing, what you just said. For me, anything, as long as it comes with a very detailed kind of almost micro reflection on it. That's let's say what gives it the scientific value, is the detailed description and made it replicable for
Could you
others.
exhibit those visuals in their own way?
No, I would like to. I did one last exhibition in Madeira. That was in 10 years ago, actually, because then I was busy to build my CV to become full professor, to be able to go back.
The text takes on a formal beauty and the image takes on a narrative beauty.
It kind of, yeah, there's a dialogue there. I've been thinking about, I have some students that are also very talented artists, and I'm thinking maybe we could do something artistic for once.
Well, same as with Nuno's talk, we'll upload the recording to the designer's website. Both Nuno and Valentina are still with us till the 4th of April.
Yes.
So do reach out to
Actually,
them,
yeah,
send
this
them an
is-
email, have coffee with them for more one-on-one chat. But for now, please join me in thanking Valentina for really great work.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
And
Marcus.
there's also
Thank
the
you all.
kudos coming from our online audience, from
Oh,
Susan Kate and Michael from Burke, who's joined us in Turkey.
oh, great.